The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, NEPM's news and review from Western Mass. I'm Carrie Saldo. It's Friday, January 17th, 2025. Who are this week's news nuts, you ask? Why, it's NEPM reporter Karen Brown, Jane Kaufman, Community Voices editor at the Berkshire Eagle, and the Springfield Republican Investigations editor Greta Yoakum. In just a bit, you'll hear why the 413 has more sober homes for men than for women, plus concerns from some Western Mass farmers who say less money for a low-income food program is having broad impacts. And don't click that link just yet. Details of an EasyPass text messaging scam and what you can do to protect yourself. Have something to say about that or anything that pops into your head? Email us, therundown@nepm.org. All right, ladies, let's get into it this morning. Governor Maura Healey's State of the Commonwealth address was last night. Adam Riley from GBH News called it like this. Quote, Maura Healey marked the midpoint of her governorship Thursday with her third big speech taking stock of where Massachusetts stands right now. The speech ran to 8 densely printed pages as prepped for delivery, was bullish on Massachusetts' present and future, despite some lingering challenges, for example, the obstinately high cost of housing, that Healey made clear she's working to address. Of course, that same description applies to most state of the state and city speeches delivered by politicians across the country. Loving that reality check there from Riley, right? Like, this is something that happens annually, and there is a bit of theme and some variation. He went on to compare and contrast Healey's speech last night with last year's speech, and he came up with 5 key takeaways, and you can check that out on our website. But I want to hear from our panel about your key takeaways. Karen Brown, let me start with you.
Well, I am a health reporter, so I'm always sort of listening to what we as a state are going to be doing around health issues. And I've actually been covering the crisis in finding a primary care doctor, which Healey very kind of wisely went straight to, like, don't you hate it when you try and get into the doctor and you can't get in? And she's not wrong. And she, of course, said that this is one of her priorities is to shore up the primary care workforce. This is another one of those devil in the details situations where how is that going to be done? And it's very, very complicated health economics that explain why we don't have enough primary care doctors, why it is so hard to get in. And lots of different committees have been working on this, so it'll be very interesting to see what the governor can do from her office to actually make it more accessible to find and see your primary care doctor.
And certainly not the first crack at the bat for this, not just for Healey, but for the legislature. This is a years, if not decades-long challenge here in Massachusetts, whether it's with the reimbursement rates being so low with primary care doctors or just the cycle of folks retiring from the profession and new folks, younger folks, not moving in to the profession. So we will see. Hopefully, I'm optimistic that there's some movement here.
Money is generally one of the things that helps, and money is one of the things that there never is enough of. So how's that going to work?
Yeah. Jane Kaufman, how about for you? Standouts in what Healey said last night or things she didn't mention that you wish she mentioned?
I was impressed with her mention of border security, which surprised me, although that certainly has had an impact on housing in terms of the number of migrants or immigrants who are here in Western Mass. And then I also thought her reference to Donald Trump was really sort of impressive, and I just want to quote it. In 4 days, there will be a transition of power in Washington. I assure you we will take every opportunity to work with the federal government in ways that benefits Massachusetts, and I also promise you we will not change who we are.
Yeah, she didn't name him in the speech at all, but that certainly seems like a clear reference to the past and incoming president. Greta Yoakum, how about for you?
Yeah, I thought the focus on transportation was interesting. I hadn't necessarily expected that, and I did appreciate that it wasn't just about the tea, which always feels less relevant to
Although it
us.
did get plenty of mention.
It did get plenty of mentions, and I guess everyone loves the new person in charge, which is great. But I loved that. That she talked about the fine free system now, or fare free system for the regional transit. So like the PVTA now is fine free, or fare free, which is pretty awesome. Like I hopped on it a couple months ago to get to work one day when I didn't have a car, and there was no fare. It was great.
And it seemed like the governor was keeping Western Mass in mind at least a bit. She name checked
bit.
Chicopee at one point. So, Jane, go ahead.
I just wanted to say regarding transportation that bridges are a huge issue in Berkshire County. It seems that when I ride around, I can't say every day or even necessarily every week, but there's always a new detour. So
Yep, absolutely.
I just thought I had a moment of humor when she was talking about the tease budget. What I heard was the cheese budget, so that Phil and his team could keep cooking. And I was like, why are people not laughing?
Bring on the macaroni, baby. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to move us on to Jane Kaufman, your Berkshire Eagle reporting this week. The headline, electric cars are catching on, but where are all the EV chargers in the Berkshires, and why aren't there more? And as an EV driver, Jane, that headline grabbed my attention. The subheadline I also loved. Experts and EV drivers agree Berkshires need more accessible EV charging stations to help fight range anxiety. Jane, for those who haven't heard of it, what is range anxiety?
So if you've ever been on a country road driving a regular combustible engine car like my Scion 2006 XB manual, and you find that your little orange light comes on, the equivalent of in driving an electric vehicle would be watching the computer dashboard click down the miles and realizing that you do not have enough range to get to the next charging station.
You're running out of juice, just like you're running out of gas. But unlike a gas vehicle where you might phone a friend or walk to the nearest gas station and come back with your fuel, you're stuck if you run out of electricity, right? You were hearing that from plenty of people this week. And, as Massachusetts, quoting here, as Massachusetts races to meet its clean energy goals and electric cars catch on, more electric vehicles are arriving in the Berkshires, which means more drivers looking for public, easy access to EV charging stations. While there are plans in the works and on the books for more public EV chargers in the Berkshires, experts and EV drivers agree that the Berkshires will need more publicly accessible EV charging stations to help fight that range anxiety that you talked about. Now, while you've zeroed in on the Berkshires, this is certainly not a challenge that is unique to the Berkshires, Western Mass, and, the state of Massachusetts and even the country as we look to move away from these combustion engines, right? I wanted to highlight some numbers in your story. To support an estimated 970,000 electric vehicles on the road by 2030, the State Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Coordinating Council says a total of about 750,000 charging stations are needed, roughly 45,000 public and 700,000 residential. Jane, that is a far cry from where we are now, according to your reporting. What's in the works to help us get there, and what did you hear about the lack of charging stations?
So there are the utilities, all three utilities, Unitil, Eversource, and National Grid, got money to pass on to people and businesses to actually build charging stations, but all of that money has been committed. And so until there's another kind of wave of that, things are kind of just being built out as that money gets funneled through. That's really what I understand.
I'm kind of surprised that the Berkshires has that kind of problem, because I would have thought that there's just plenty of money out there and plenty of sort of environmentally conscious drivers, and I just surprised them.
Well, when you think about the fact that what's called a level 3 charging station can cost literally hundreds of thousands of dollars to build, maybe not.
And the level 3 charger is the fastest charger out there. It's going to charge your car the quickest, but it's not something you're going to see in someone's home. Those are something that you're going to see dotted around public spots. Greta, any thoughts?
Yeah, definitely a huge problem. I'm really glad that you wrote about it. It's something I have thought about and wondered about for electric chargers. I went to Norway in September, actually, and drove an electric car I was just on vacation, drove it across the country. And there were chargers everywhere. It was amazing. So like every gas station had an electric car charger. I never had a problem. So that kind of gave me a little bit of hope.
It's also really interesting that the grid will have to be enhanced in order to do this. A charging station at a highway, which presumably is many charging stations, I'm not just talking about one, they said it could be the equivalent of a municipal stadium or a small city with the amount of electricity it actually requires.
That was just astonishing to me, that really just put it in such incredibly crystal clear language, that this is the challenge that we're facing and the opportunity, right? Because this is going to, more of these on the road could help to reduce carbon emissions. But so there's that push-pull too, because it depends on where is the electricity coming from that is charging your EV. It's been interesting reading that reporting. As I said, I'm an EV driver, and I heard what you wrote about range anxiety. When I first bought my car, I had a 5-hour trip back from where I bought it. So I quickly learned about charging and how the process works. But one of the big challenges I have seen as an EV driver is you get to a charging station and it's full and you have to wait, or it's broken. So it might have 6 terminals, but only 2 of them are working. So not only more infrastructure, but better infrastructure, I think, is going to be something that is going to need to be a part of this conversation as we move forward. Jane, what are you keeping an eye on as we do move forward around this issue?
Well, it'll be interesting to see when the next funding rounds come through. I think that the Infrastructure Relief Act, I think I may have just flubbed that name, actually provided
some pool of money coming to support this. We know what
it
you're
will
saying.
be just interesting to see how committed the state and federal government. We'll see if the federal government is actually committed to this issue, but the state government should be. So.
All right. Well, I'm going to move us on. Greta Yoakum, Springfield Republican, reporting that you did this week. The headline, Meet the People Working to Open a Woman's Sober Home in Western Mass. You reported this week on sober homes and specifically the number of beds there are for women versus men at sober homes that are certified by the Massachusetts Alliance for Sober Housing. Quoting here, across the state, sober homes for men far outnumber those for women. In Western Massachusetts, there are about 30 beds for women and more than 200 for men, according to the Massachusetts Alliance for Sober Housing, which certifies the facilities, as I said. In Western Mass specifically, 30 beds. So do we know why there are fewer of these beds for women than there are for men?
That's a great question. I don't have a answer. But it is a trend or a ratio that is true across the state. The disparity between beds for men and women is there's more of a gap in Western Massachusetts, but there are more for men than women across the state as well in other areas. So as to exactly why, it's a good question.
Yeah. And a sober home is this residence where people typically have completed their addiction treatment, but then they might not be able to or ready to live on their own. So they move to these group settings, and there is no state oversight of these, and they're not covered by insurance. So people are paying out of pocket, and largely these homes are simply in residential areas, and people might be paying per bed. And as I got more interested in the concept, I learned that the homes have a really inconsistent reputation. Some have been called into question as unsafe or moneymakers for the owners, where others reportedly are well run and helpful for people. Then about a decade ago, the state got involved and said, look, we do need some kind of process. And that's where this Massachusetts Alliance for Sober Housing, or MASH, came into existence. But that MASH certification is optional. Greta, when you were looking at the availability of these homes for men versus women that are certified, and we need to be specific about that, right? Do we know why they're segregated by gender, especially at this age and stage that we are as a group of people?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I asked Dr. Megan Miller of Bay State, who's involved in this fundraising project with the Michael J. Diaz Foundation to open this women's sober home in Springfield. And she talked about the importance of gender-specific care, so just in healthcare generally, which would include, treating substance use disorder. Just there are differences between genders and gender-specific care people might need. So that's one reason. I'm sure there are other reasons as well. Perhaps some people might just say it helps you kind of just focus.
Maybe
more
personal
on-
safety.
Yeah,
Like,
personal safety. But yeah, not sure all the reasons exactly.
And when you reported on this effort in the 413 to increase sober housing for women, you mentioned Dr. Miller. What are they doing and where are they in the process?
Yeah, so the foundation has 3 facilities already for men in the Springfield area, and now they're fundraising for this women's home, and they're about halfway to their goal of, I think it's about $500,000 to buy the house and fund it. They don't want a mortgage, they want to buy it outright so they don't have that debt. So they're working on fundraising and hope to open something next year.
Well, we'll keep watching this via you, Greta. Still ahead on the rundown, why some Western Mass farms say decreased support for a food program is creating a financial crisis. Plus, we'll unpack the details of a tricky new text messaging scam. Have questions or comments? Email the rundown at nepm.org. I'm Carrie Saldo. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. I am Carrie Saldo, joined in studio this morning by Jane Kaufman, Karen Brown, and Greta Yoakum. Let's get right back into it. Karen Brown, you did some reporting this week for NEPM. The headline, after Massachusetts Healthy Incentive Program cuts, Western Mass farms see dramatic drop in sales. Quoting here, some Western Mass farms say new cuts in the state program that helps low-income people buy fresh produce is creating a financial crisis. Before the cuts, families with SNAP food benefits would get between $40 and $80 per month for fresh produce, but now the limit for the Healthy Incentives Program, or HIP, is $20 a month for everyone. Not only is this change impacting families, as you reported, Karen, but farmers. What did you learn?
well, they're used to, a lot of their customers being people that have the HIP benefits and being able, those folks, depending on how big their families are, can spend up to $80 on fresh produce, and all of a sudden it's been cut by half or by a quarter. So they're just simply not selling as much produce. They're not selling as much produce to wholesalers who, in turn, also serve this population. So it's not just affecting people who cannot get as much produce as they used to, but it's affecting the farm's ability to sell it, and it's affecting the economy as a whole. And one farmer I talked to said it's also affecting the entire farmers market because folks just figure it's not really for $20 a month, not just a visit, but a month, not worth me even going to the market. So they're not buying maple syrup or flowers or things that aren't even HIP related.
So those other vendors who are coming out to there's a Springfield Farmers Market organized by Red Fire Farm. I think that was the farmer you are referring to, Ryan Voiland. In Springfield, they also have one in Amherst and Northampton, but he was concerned specifically for the potential impacts on Springfield, right?
Because there's just a larger low-income population there that requires or relies on HIP. So he's hoping that people who don't use HIP, who have their own budgets to buy fresh produce, will make up the difference. But by how much, that's the question.
Jane Kaufman, I know you've reported on HIP in the past. What stood out to you when you saw this news this week?
So I did some reporting about this in November and noted that 285 farmers across the state relied on HIP sales, and that includes farmers who run SNAP, which is the name for the federal food, what we used to call food stamps benefit. It stands for Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. CSA programs, which are basically, it's a community supported agriculture, which is essentially almost like a buying club where you pay in advance to help a farmer through a season. And through 38 farmers markets, 12 mobile markets, and with 109 stops, and 59 farmers with 66 stands that were open in December. But in addition, in earlier reporting that I did, I quoted Margaret Moulton, who's the executive director of Berkshire Grown, which supports local farmers. And she said many farmers are on SNAP. Many farmers have a second source of income, and I don't mean trust fund income. I mean a second job. And in my conversations with farmers, these HIP cuts will affect them both ways, as vendors and in their own personal ability to actually buy food.
It was interesting because when I read about the cuts in November that would be coming, I thought, well, don't we hear about this every year? The benefits run out at some point. And so, as I understand it, and you can correct me, Karen, if I'm wrong, they made this adjustment to try and stretch the funds through the end of the fiscal dollar year because of the allotment that the state legislature set aside this year for HIP. So there's always been a push-pull, but now it seems like this change has made a more acute problem.
Well, they the farmer that I talked to said this is going on much longer than they were expecting, and it's really making them worry that it could enter into the summer season, which would be really devastating because there's just more produce to sell. And I also talked to Joe Comerford,
state
senator, about what can be done, and she says basically legislators are concerned about this, but they have to wait for another supplemental budget from the governor. The governor did put one out, but it was on emergency shelters, and they felt like they could not take money from emergency shelters. They don't know when she might put out another one, but that would be an opportunity for them to add some more HIP money in. But I presume there's lots of competition for where that funding should go.
So certainly Senator Comerford is hopeful there. And Comerford told the Daily Hampshire Gazette that the HIP program is a triple win as it spurs economic development, puts healthy food into people's hands, and boosts that revenue for farmers. So we'll certainly keep watching this issue. Jane Kaufman, you had another story for the Berkshire Eagle this week. Easy Drive MA texting scam asks for just $6.99, but what is that really after? And some tips on how you can protect yourself. So, okay, earlier you told us about range anxiety. Now this story delves into this idea of smishing, which is a portmanteau of SMS, the short message service, which is basically a text, and phishing, which we know about, these online scams, right? Are you next going to go and work for Merriam-Webster? What are these scammers attempting with this smishing?
Well, even if they only get $6.99 or another small amount, and those amounts are obviously designed to not encourage people to think too hard before just simply pressing yes or going to the link.
Seems like a reasonable amount that you might owe. EasyPass tends to be these small amounts, at least in my own experience.
So even if that's all they get, apparently that's pretty good because these are very easy scams and inexpensive scams to actually
and then they have your information,
implement.
Right?
And then in addition, if they can actually perform identity theft, well then, hey, that's kind of a payload, apparently. And I love all the names for these scams. There's also vishing, which involves voice.
Yep.
I love how you called smishing like a Yiddish. It sounds like a Yiddish term.
Yeah, in the story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have received some of these, not the EasyPass scam, but simple ones where they say, "Hey, hi, how are you?" Just these simple attempts to spark a conversation. I've even had a weird one a couple of times where it's a picture of a woman holding a bottle of wine, like she has these very finely manicured hands, and the question is like, "Was this the bottle you were seeking?" And because I'm a nerdy journalist, I Googled the bottle and it was worth a couple $100, and I was like, "This is definitely not meant for me. I'm not spending $100, a couple $100 on a bottle."
I'm a journalist. I can't afford that. Yeah.
Too rich for my blood. Anybody else have been subject to these, Greta?
Yeah, I think I got the EasyPass text and deleted it, but I've definitely gotten ones in the past. Maybe 6 months ago, I got one that was from like my boss's boss or posing as my boss's boss saying like, "Oh, can you do this, errand for me?" And I like immediately was like, "Oh, what do I have to do? Like, where is this?" And then I realized, I asked someone, I was like, "Oh, this isn't actually his phone number," but they almost got me.
And I get texts from my dentist reminding me of my appointments. I'm like, that's not real. It's like, oh, wait, that one actually is real.
I almost got caught on this scam. Believe it or not, after I wrote the story, I was on the Mass Pike on Sunday, and just after I got off the Pike, my phone lit up with exactly this text, and I thought, oh, that's wild. Like they must be really following my car. And then I realized, no, this is just random. This is a scammer.
And what tipped you off to the fact that it was a scam?
Well, because I actually, it was exactly as it had been written, and I almost fell in.
Yeah. So one of the things you pointed out in the story is you can really zoom in on the details, right? Take a minute, go slow, don't respond, and take a look. The URL can sometimes be a clue that it's fake. But if someone accidentally does go ahead and click on something like this, Jane, what did you learn about what they can do to help themselves in the aftermath of that?
I actually did not learn about that, but you can report these things to the FBI, and the FBI takes them seriously. The FBI has made arrests in phishing, spoofing, other kinds of scams, and presumably they will in smishing as well.
But shouldn't a person also, if they've gone ahead and done this, change your
change
password?
Yeah, right. Take the typical things you would to protect your identity.
And then maybe be on the lookout, right? Like, has someone charged something fraudulently and try and pursue.
Check your credit.
Yeah, check your credit. And if you want to report it to the FBI, you can check out Jane's story on the Berkshire Eagle website. You have a great sort of here's what you can do step-by-step process for how to go through this. It's just it's unnerving, right? Because it seems like a reasonable amount of money, $6.99. Seems like something might be coming from EasyPass. It's not like I feel like scammers are getting smarter. The early scams were like, you've won $10 million. Just click this link to receive it. And now there's smaller increments that seem more conceivable. It's something that we like to talk about in our family because you never know. Someone might accidentally click on something like this and hard-earned savings could go out the window. So it's challenging.
Yeah, when I talked with Brian Levine, who's a professor at UMass about this, he specifically said we should really take steps to try to protect older people, but also kids. Although kids would not specifically fall into this one, but there are gift scams like this, for example.
Right, because kids often younger and younger have access to cell phones because parents want to be able in communication with their kids. So if it looks like, they've won $50 or they won a gift card to their favorite store, they're taking different shapes and sizes. And I thought it was really interesting how he pointed out the importance of this type of digital literacy for kids as well as, the entire age spectrum, right? All right. My favorite part of the show, predictions, scoops, and praise time from our panel here, where I'll ask everyone to make a prediction about the week's news, give us a scoop about the story that you're working on, or maybe heap some praise on a newsworthy nugget. Karen Brown, I'll start with you. Prediction, scoop, praise, what's on your mind this week?
Well, sort of a plug. There's a new book out by Pagan Kennedy, who was my co-host on a podcast that we did here out of NAPM a few years ago. But her new book is called The Secret History of the Rape Kit. And it's really interesting. It traces the woman who got almost no credit for this pretty revolutionary, but, a small thing that became a revolutionary outcome on the rape kit back in the 70s. And I think...
And that's the kit that's used if someone is assaulted to gather evidence, right?
Right, exactly. It's just a few items to help gather sort of physical evidence, but they didn't even have that before this kit came out. So it's a story of this woman, a story of Pagan herself and her history, and it shows how kind of small measures can have revolutionary outcomes. And I think as our new political landscape is going to have a lot of conversations about reproductive rights, I think this story is really relevant. Very
timely book. Jane Kaufman, how about for you? Prediction, scoop, praise?
I just want to praise the work of Heather Bello at the Berkshire Eagle, who's done amazing work on uncovering allegations regarding a faculty member at Miss Hall's school in Pittsfield, a girls' school. Also, today she's got the top story in the paper regarding Fairview Hospital, plans for that. And anything she writes, Housatonic water turning brown in the summers, everything she does is
She
just
has
amazing.
her finger on the pulse of Great Barrington and beyond, and I just always appreciate her reporting and her investigations. Greta Yoakum, speaking of investigations, what's on your mind this week? Scoop, prediction, praise?
Yeah, I'll also shout out to Heather. Have been following the Miss Hall's coverage. I will do a scoop, which is that my colleague at the Republican, Namu Sampath, and I have a new installment of our Faces of the Housing Crisis series coming out sometime in the next couple of days, and it has to do with manufactured housing parks or mobile home parks.
And when is that going to drop?
sometime in the next couple days.
All right, we will be on the lookout for that for sure. I have praise this week for Adam Riley. He had a prediction about Governor Healy following last night's State of the Commonwealth address. Quote, Healy isn't just speaking as the governor anymore. She's also speaking as someone who's very much in the mix as the Democratic Party searches for its next standard bearer in the post-Biden era. Healy's term on Beacon Hill is up in 2026. Now, she hasn't said whether she is going to run for re-election. I tend to agree with Adam's prediction there. Thanks for joining us this week on The Rundown. My thanks to NEPM reporter Karen Brown, Jane Kaufman of the Berkshire Eagle, and Greta Yoakum of the Springfield Republican. I'm Carrie Saldo. You've been listening to The Rundown on 88.5 NEPM.